Okay, so in this video, we talk about how the British looted India for 45 trillion robbery, and I know that number seems a little absurd. It seems like it's just made up because if someone were to walk into your house and steal $45 trillion worth of stuff from you, you would immediately assume they must be some sort of magician. Hello, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm a historian, and this channel is all about exploring history, culture, and society. Let's jump into it. Like, what the hell? How is it even possible? But the thing is, it is possible. In fact, it's very possible. Because it turns out that the British didn't actually steal anything physical from India. The land in question accounts for roughly 1/5 of the total landmass of the United Kingdom. And then when they left, they just decided to keep it. Now, of course, they didn't just take the land for no reason. They also stole from China, Africa, and pretty much anywhere else they went. And when you break it down into its various components, it becomes clear just how insidious the British Empire's exploitation of India really was. For instance, 1/3 of the total loot, so roughly $15 trillion, consists of gold and silver. Now, to put that into perspective, the Bank of England only has around $400 billion worth of gold stored in its vaults. Indian merchants and traders also benefited to a certain extent, as did the European powers that competed with the British in the Indian market. Now, I know that number seems kinda crazy, but when you really start to break it down, it makes a lot of sense. After all, the British were in India for a long time, and they had a lot of people working for them. Plus, they were using advanced technology that the Indians didn't have, which allowed them to extract resources much faster than the Indians could. However, the vast majority of the wealth generated through these exploitative practices ended up in the hands of the British. I mean, there is no way to justify stealing 1/5 of another country's land and then never giving it back. I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something new. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Also, do you forget to subscribe if you haven't already, because there are lots more videos like this one on the way. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. But I do say it to provide some context. The British were some kind of magical thieves who could magically conjure up $45 trillion out of thin air. They were simply people who were willing to do whatever it took to make money, just like everyone else. And they happened to be in the right place at the right time when there was a lot of money to be made in India. So the amount of gold that the British stole from India is equivalent to roughly 37,000 of everything they currently have. Many of them actively participated in the slave trade and other exploitative practices. But the point is that everyone was motivated by the same thing: money. In fact, the $45 trillion figure only represents the amount of money they stole from India. Specifically, if we were to add up all the money they stole from everywhere, the number would be even higher. If we start sugarcoating things or trying to make everyone seem like a hero or a victim, we're doing everyone a disservice. History isn't about black and white. It's about understanding the complexities of the past and learning from it, so that we do want to repeat it. They did, after all, engage in a few wars and rebellions to secure their hold on it. Maybe the British could have treated the Indians better and everyone would have been better off. But then again, maybe not. Who knows? The point is, the history is full of what-ifs, and it's ultimately up to us to decide how we want to remember it. But that's besides the point. The point is that land is really what they were after. Yes, you heard that right. The British stole $10 trillion worth of drugs from India. I mean, they didn't exactly steal the drugs themselves, but they did establish large-scale plantations for growing opium, and then force Indian farmers to grow it under impossible conditions. For instance, the British would often require Indian farmers to grow a minimum amount of opium each year, regardless of the market price. This meant that many farmers were forced to grow opium, even when it wasn't profitable, and they were punished severely if they failed to meet their quotas. That's like taking 20 of all of England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, and giving it to someone else. That's just wild. And setting up monopolies, they gave them exclusive rights to trade certain goods. For instance, the British East India Company once set up a monopoly on the trade of salt, which is an essential ingredient in gunpowder. By controlling the supply of saltpeter, the British were able to dictate the price and extract even more wealth from India. And even wilder than that is the fact that the British still own this land to this day. I mean, technically, the Crown still owns roughly 25% of the UK's land, but the vast majority of it is owned by private individuals, most of whom are descendants of the original colonists. Instead, they stole something far more powerful: land. Now, I know what you're thinking. Land doesn't have any real monetary value. I mean, sure, you can put a price tag on a piece of land, but at the end of the day, It's just dirt. Well, that's true, except when you realize that the land in question accounts for roughly 1/5 of the total landmass of the United Kingdom. Now, for those of you who are wondering, yes, I am aware that 45 trillion is a completely ridiculous number. First, we need to convert it into today's money. And second, we need to understand exactly what these $45 trillion consisted of. Now, when it comes to the first part, converting £33.8 billion to today's money, the answer is roughly $45 trillion. And think, okay, Britain just straight up stole this much money from India. The reality is a little more nuanced than that. For starters, the $45 trillion figure only represents wealth extracted from India. It doesn't necessarily represent the actual amount of money stolen. I mean, that's kind of hard to calculate since the whole point of stealing is to not get caught. So it's likely that the real number is higher than 45 trillion. This means that the total loot Britain extracted from India between 1765 and 1947 is worth roughly the same amount of money as it would be worth today. Of course, some items would be more valuable today than they were back then, like art or land, for example. But for the most part, natural resources have stayed relatively stable in terms of their value. So overall, 45 trillion is pretty much bang on. I mean, $45 trillion. What does that even look like? Well, if you were to take out a $40 bill and lay them end to end, it would stretch for over 126,000 miles. And if you took all of the $40 bills in the world, there would be enough to circle the planet 5 times. Basically, $45 trillion is a lot of money. In 2016, a report found that British companies looted $45 trillion or £33.8 billion from India between 1765 and 1947. And while it might seem like that as an insane amount of money, which it definitely is, it actually isn't all that surprising. After all, we already know that colonialism was a pretty brutal period for most of the colonized countries. There were widespread cases of mistreatment, murder, slavery, exploitation, child labor, and above all, the extraction of natural resources. So while we may not have known the exact figure, we did already know that Britain got obscenely rich off of India. We just didn't know exactly how much. Well, now we do. And before we get into the details of how the British robbed India of $45 trillion, alright, so let's talk about how British people stole $45 trillion from India. And in order to make sense of this number, we need to do 2 things. Now, when it comes to what exactly the $45 trillion consisted of, well, that's where things get interesting. Let me repeat that. So basically, while the British didn't physically take anything back with them to Britain, they did claim ownership of all of the land in India that they came across. Now, while it's easy to look at the $45 trillion figure on top of that, it's important to remember that the British didn't just steal from India. That being said, $45 trillion is still a pretty staggering number. On top of that, roughly $10 trillion worth of the loot consists of opium and other drugs. On top of that, the British also engaged in a variety of other exploitative practices, such as manipulating currency exchange rates. Now, of course, the British weren't the only ones profiting from this system. So, there you have it. That's how the British looted India for $45 trillion. Now, I don't say any of this to justify what the British did. Now, of course, that's not to say that the Indians weren't complicit in this whole thing as well. Now, as for what could have been done differently, who knows? Personally, I prefer to remember it in terms of hard facts and figures, because I think that's the only way we can learn from it. Anyway, that's all I have for you today.